Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Eric Cline with me. Eric is known as the sales goat, and in his journey from there it is, he's pointing to it. In his journey from drug addiction to business success, one of the things that I think you're going to hear throughout his story is never giving up. And as long as you don't give up, you can still make your way to wherever you want to be. So, Eric, thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
You bet. So to start your story, at 13 years old, your folks go through a divorce. And you talked about how, it wasn't a smooth divorce. It caused a lot of conflict. So talk a little bit about just those early years and just kind of that experience on your life.
Yeah. So you've done your research.
I try.
You've done your research. No one's ever started off that way. So I can absolutely tell you've listened and you've dug deep. So for me, my story is going all the way back to 13 years old. Literally, it's like people ask, what are some of your first memories? And man, some of my first memories were where I kind of spiraled out of control. And I was the middle child. I have an older brother. I have a younger brother. And my older brother was the jock, he was the football, the baseball. Him and my dad were always into the sports and hunting and fishing. My little brother, my younger brother was a mama's boy. And I felt like I was stuck in the middle. And I know it was a lot of my own doing, but when my parents, I remember I was in sixth grade and we got the news that our parents were getting divorced. And I remember when I heard it, I ran back to my room. I literally hid in my closet in the corner, shut the door, screaming at the top of my lungs. And we had to face reality, man. My parents were getting a divorce. And I remember all the way back then, I'm 42 years old today. And going back then, it was the first time I remember my mom coming back to my room and saying, you got to go to school. And it was, I don't give a crap what you are saying. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And it was like that fork in the road for me at such a young age. But, the divorce was ugly. We as kids got drug into it. I remember sitting in front of the judge, and my parents were behind me, and the judge literally made us kids pick which parent we wanted to go and live with in front of them behind us. And at 13, at such a young age, that's not a decision a young kid wants to be able to make. My older brother and younger brother picked mom. I felt bad for dad, so I picked him. And man, it was the first, thinking about being people pleasing. It was the first time I made a decision to please somebody else and I didn't think about myself. And man, from 13 all the way to 28, I was masking my feelings with anything I could find.
Yeah. So to that, you mentioned, early on had some exposure to alcohol, a little bit with weed, and kind of starting there. And as oftentimes happens, that's a starting spot, but it's not the ending spot. And as you get more and more into this, your mom says, "Hey, you got to go the military route." So you head there, and military is a great thing because, there's discipline, there's order, but there's also a little stigma about certain folks in the military and maybe some of the things that they like to do in their free time. And that was unfortunately something that was not going to be a good spot for you. So talk a little bit about, going to the military and that kind of season in your life.
Yeah. Well, the reason it wasn't a good spot for somebody like me is a multitude of reasons. Is the first time I ever put a mood or mind altering substance into my body, I drank to the point I blacked out. The first time ever. And it was the best I had ever felt because I didn't have to feel anything.
Yeah.
So you fast forward from 13 to 19 years old. I barely graduated high school. I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about money. Money was not a subject in my household. And my mother, the reason I went to the military is she could not deal with me anymore. It's not that she didn't love me. I
Yeah.
was a loose cannon.
Yeah.
And when I remember going to the parking lot the day my mom said, she pulled in and she said, "We're not leaving here until you join one of these branches."
Mm.
And I didn't know what to do, so I just picked one of them. I ended up picking the Navy, and I scored so low on my ASVAB that I didn't have choices. They said, "You're going to be an engine man." And I ended up going off to the Navy, and all my problems followed me to the Navy. I
Yeah.
show up there. They give me a $5,000 sign-on bonus to a 19-year-old kid that has a massive drinking problem, a drug problem. I had never had that much money in my life ever at one time. I didn't know anything about money. I got myself in a ton of debt while I was in the military. I blew every dollar. I had credit cards because you're in the military. You can go to the federal credit union and they're going to open credit cards in your name. And I was maxing out credit cards, drink until I couldn't think. And that lasted for 2.5 years. I got 2 DUIs while I was in there. And the captain of my boat, I was in for 2.5 years and I got put on restriction 90 days at a clip 4 times.
Mm.
So do the math. I didn't get a lot of free time when I was in the military.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah, it was nuts.
well, and so talk a little bit about that. I think, the military, and not a military person myself, so I just take it from stories that I know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of discipline instilled, but there's also this level of you have to respect somebody because of a title, not
Yes.
necessarily because it's somebody that you know. And I can imagine, as maybe the walk of life that you had from 13 to 19,
Yeah.
that could be very confrontational to be like, "Oh, you want me to respect you just because?" I
Yeah.
can
You
see how
got a
that might have
degree in
butt heads.
basket weaving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So talk a
was.
little bit about that. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, till today, I still have things I learned in the military. If I would have not been, I was a drug addict and alcoholic when I entered the military.
Yeah.
And it was some of the things I do today. I get up and I make my bed every day. I learned that in
Yeah.
the military, right?
Yeah.
And some of the, respecting your authority. Like I still actually bring that into my life today. Like I respect the people that are above me. I treat them with respect. And it's just, it was the wrong place at the wrong time for somebody like me. The military wasn't the answer to my problems. It was just my mother did not know what to do with me. The military didn't know what to do with me. And at the end of the day, I had an addiction problem to substances that nobody was going to be able to help me with until I hit my bottom. And that
Yeah.
bottom did not come until I was 28 years old.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, once again, the vivid 7 or 8 days stands out to you, but I think it's that story at the end of where your mind was at, and the decision, or that fork in the road, that you get a different choice this time. So talk a little bit about those 7, 8 days, and that last maybe hallucination, if you will, of what happens.
Yeah, so I used to call it a hallucination.
Yeah.
It was not a hallucination. It was absolutely a power greater than
Mm.
myself
Yeah.
that brought me to life again for a
Yeah.
second time. And it was at 28 years old. By this time, I'm kicked out of the military. I've lost my license to 4 DUIs, 5 driving on suspended. It's revoked in Illinois and Hawaii. I had been to multiple treatment centers. I was blackballed from every job in Chicago as a union carpenter. My parents at this time, they I don't want to say they disowned me, but I had burnt every single bridge you could possibly burn. I couldn't walk across these bridges. They were burnt. I burnt them to crisp. And it was the last 8 days I had pulled out $3,500 from my annuity because I was in the union. And I
Yeah.
manipulated them into thinking I needed this for bills, but really I needed it for drugs. And my last 8 days, I was renting a bedroom in Chicago from a police officer that owned the house. And there
Yeah.
was a bunch of college students that were renting the other rooms, but they were all gone for the summer. So it was just me in this house. And the guy that owned it was a cop. And I remember for literally 8 days straight, I had $3,500 and the dope man knew how much money I had. And like clockwork, he would be at the back door when I would run out of dope. And the drug that ultimately brought me to my knees was crack cocaine. I said I would never do it. I thought, the weed, the alcohol, the coke. Well, I went beyond that and I became the crackhead I said I would never become.
Yeah.
And I was locked in this house for 8 days and I wouldn't leave my bedroom. I would literally piss in the corner in bath towels because I couldn't go across the hallway to use the restroom because I was hallucinating, man. I was out of my mind. If you've ever been up for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, or 8 days, you start acting really weird.
Yeah.
And the very last day, now mind you, when I was smoking the crack, I was doing it off of a fire gas stove. And I was burnt. I had to get so close to the stove. I was burning each side of my face. And I would rotate what side I was doing it on because it hurt so bad.
Yeah.
I had burned off all my eyelashes. I burned off my eyebrows. And I had nothing, blisters. And at the end, I was 135 pounds. And I was locked in my room and I start hearing helicopters. And I start hearing police sirens get real close to the house I was living in. And eventually I hear the front door get kicked in. And it was the ambulance and paramedics and the police rushing down the hallway. And I hear my mother outside just crying hysterically, saying, "Leave him alone. He's dead. He's dead. There's nothing you can do for him." My brother was out there arguing with them, trying to get in. Amongst all the commotion, I'm in my bedroom, in my underwear, just under the sheets, middle of the day, sweating like a madman, freaking out. And they got everyone calm. They got everyone back. And they said, on 3, we're going to kick the door in and we're going to go in there and try to revive him. They all thought I was in there dead.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there in my bed, just sweating, freaking out. And they go, 1, 2. I jump up from my bed and I bust the door open and I'm like, I'm alive. And I literally was standing in a hallway by myself in my underwear and there was nobody there.
Yeah.
And people ask me, Eric, what got you clean?
Yeah.
And my answer is obviously there's a power greater than myself out there that helped me see, the clear vision. It was either death or I was going to make a decision to live.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I didn't get clean for my mother. I didn't get clean to save a job. I didn't get clean to save a girlfriend. I didn't get clean to save a relationship. I didn't get clean for any other reason this time, but to save my own life.
Yeah. That's good. Now, here's a question for you, and I'm sure the answer is it varies from person to person, but someone listening right now says, gosh, I've got a family member that's addicted to something, or I've got a family member that's got an eating disorder, right? And I can see the path of destruction they're heading down, but how do I be there for them? How do I, bring them to a spot or help them see these things? So what would be a piece of advice, somebody listening that maybe then they themselves aren't walking through it, but they're, like family members or friends that you'd had that maybe, just are trying to help?
Yeah. So it's, that's a tricky question.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is for the people that are wondering, what can they do? Nothing. They can't do anything. Yeah. I truly, truly believe with all my hearts of hearts that everybody has to hit their bottom. And if you soften that bottom for them, they haven't truly hit where they needed to go. You
Yeah.
know, they say sometimes it's jails, institutions, or death.
Yep.
And if you don't make it to the third one, which is death, you know, you ultimately go to jail, or you wind up in an institution, or you get clean. You stop whatever you're doing. My mother for years thought she could fix me.
Mm.
And you can't fix somebody until I was willing to be, I was willing to fix myself.
Yep.
And that ultimately comes with hitting your bottom.
Yeah. That's good. Now, for somebody that's maybe listening and they're struggling with something, what can they do to come to a realization? So maybe their bottom isn't as far down as a bottom, right? Maybe they can realize a bottom earlier in the process.
Yeah. So it's all about, is the pain great enough, man?
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
when you look at yourself in the mirror, are you happy with where you're at? And the answer is no, you're not.
Yeah.
For anyone out there that's actually thinking about this. And for me, when I changed people, places, and things, my life got beyond my wildest dreams. When I quit hanging out with people that did drugs, when I quit hanging out at places where that kind of activities were happening, and then what I was doing with my free time. In the very beginning, I was heavily involved with Narcotics Anonymous, which for years, for over a decade, I was heavily involved with Narcotics Anonymous. And you know, as I sit here and talk today, I kind of steered away from it, just because when I would go there, there was so much negativity. I felt like it almost brought me down.
Yeah.
But for anyone that's stuck, the only way to get unstuck is to take action.
Yeah.
Again, and it may sound cliche, but if nothing changes, nothing changes.
That's right.
When,
That's right.
when the pain gets great enough, we all change. And is the pain great enough for you?
That's so good. Now, to your point, you gotta change certain things. So this day comes and goes, and you say, "All right, I gotta get out of here." So you reach out to your aunt and you go live with her, but that's a bad deal for you. So you call a buddy Ryan, and maybe the reason you call them doesn't end up being the reason you needed to call them. So talk a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, damn, man, you really did your homework. You are the most prepared of anyone that I've ever done a podcast with. So,
Well, I appreciate it. I want to make this a good one for you.
yeah. So I ended up, there was a pint of vodka sitting on the table, and I poured that pint of vodka into a halfway empty Gatorade bottle. And it was just to get the courage to go out and face life, to face reality. I literally couldn't muster up the courage to walk outside, but I knew I had to do something. I slammed the vodka. I got on a train. I called my aunt, and I planned on staying with her. But when I opened the refrigerator, I saw some liquor, beer in the refrigerator. And I'm like, my problem is not their problem, right? They don't need to quit drinking because I can't stop drinking.
Yeah.
I can't stay here. I called my buddy Ryan, and deep down inside, I thought he might still be using, because he was the guy I used to do dope with. And when I called him up, he was like, "Hey man, I got years clean." He was like, "You can come stay with me. I'll help you get clean." So for 28 days, he brought me into his house. He fed me, he clothed me, he brought me to meetings. And I remember, like, a few days into staying with him, I was in the shower at night, and I had this just massive urge to want to use. And
Yeah.
I remember, getting on my hands and knees and just kneeling down in the shower and praying, "God, please just let me make it through this moment. Like, I don't care about tomorrow. Just
Yeah.
get me through this one moment." And I was crying, literally crying. Please don't let me use. Please don't let me use. And I made it through a night where the urge went away.
Yeah.
And I stayed with him for it was like 28 or 29 days. I still had 60 days left of my insurance through the union. And he ended up getting online, researching a place down in South Florida. And he put me on a plane. He packed a suitcase for me, limited clothes. And he was like, dude, you're going to Fort Lauderdale. You're going to go to treatment. And man, I went down to Fort Lauderdale, checked myself into a treatment center. I am forever grateful for Ryan that helped me out and opened his door for me and helped me in those first 28, 29 days, because those were really the crucial moments for me to have somewhere safe that I knew they weren't using. I knew my life wasn't in jeopardy, and I could like get a clear mind that going to treatment this time was something I wanted to do. Somebody didn't want it. I wasn't doing it for somebody else.
Yeah. So, something you mentioned, and I'm sure this is a process of these 28 days and then, the rehab center, the treatment center, and then post that. But I think one piece that maybe I'm even connecting from my original question of how can someone be there for you is maybe once they've made the decision to not hold the grudge, not hold bitterness, not hold resentment towards who they were. Now, once again, there's still repairing that has to happen, right? Depending on what's happened, what transpired in those relationships. You can't just go back to, 100% immediately. I understand that. But, there's that element of being there for someone once they do make the choice. And I think the other part is, how did you gain the confidence, gain the, humble pie of like, I want to restore these relationships and, be willing to bring yourself to that?
You mean the bridges I burned?
Yeah.
It took years, believe it or not. It's, and us as addicts, we forget the damage we've done. We forget the years of damage, the years of lying, the years of letting people down when we said this will be the last time. I promise I will never do it again. I swear to you, if you do this for me one more time, I'll never, like, it was years and years of that to the ones I loved, to my friends. And when I got clean, and I knew this was the time, but everyone around me didn't know it was the time. Like, they're used to the old Eric. So the one thing that I can say is, you can amend the relationships. You can amend you can repair all the bridges that are done, that you've ruined or burned. Some take way longer than others. I'm 14 years. I'm going to be celebrating 15 years this year. And there are some relationships that I have burnt that all I can do is pray for them. Like they're not, I don't know if they will ever want to see my face again. But just know, like, in time, if you continue to do the right thing, people will see that. People will see it over time. Like, listen, my mom used to, she used to damn near disown me. And she's one of my biggest fans today. Like, she's a raving fan of mine. She loves what I'm doing, and she supports everything that I do.
Well, and one thing that I think, people can take encouragement from is, our decisions, or maybe things that we might call a mistake. It's not a life sentence, right?
No.
That you can pivot from it. Now, it happened, right? We can't change anything about the fact that it happened, but it doesn't mean that you have to live in, self-doubt or pity or, all of that the rest of your life, or shame or guilt or regret, right? It's like, hey, it did happen. There's no doubt about it. But to your point, if I'm truly making the decision, I want to change the trajectory of where I'm going, it doesn't have to be something that continues to weigh you down. You've got years ahead of you, right? I mean, shoot, you can, you're living, breathing 14 years and you got a lot more ahead of you, God willing, but it's like, you're changing the trajectory of where you're at.
I have forgiven myself.
That's so important.
For damn near everything that I've done. And if there's there may be some things I'm not thinking about, but I can sit here today and tell you, in the last 14 years, I have forgiven myself for what I have done all of those years. I don't carry it with me today. I don't have any shame or guilt in what I did. And I'm okay with that. Like, I'm confident in who I am today.
I love that. I don't know if you know Damon West or not, but I had him on the podcast, and long story short, he end up in Texas jail, 65-year sentence, gets out. And a long story short to it, though, he and I chatted, and I said, well, what's the remedy for this? And he goes, Phil, at the end of the day, I had to make sure my side of the street's clean, right? Like,
Yep.
I got to come to terms with myself. He goes, now I got to apologize. I got to go back to the people that I wronged as well, and,
Yeah.
do what I can there. But at the end of the day, as long as my side of the street's clean, they will clean their side with time, right? I can only do as much as what I can do there.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more with that statement.
I love it. Now, as you get out of treatment in Florida, you happen to meet a pretty important gal, and she maybe has a understanding of your background from some of her past. And so talk a little bit about entering into a relationship in this new phase of life.
Yeah, so my wife today,
Yeah.
I was 3 days before getting out of a treatment center, and my Shyla had 4 years clean. And you are not supposed to mess with somebody that's still in a treatment center. That was like the golden, you do not do that. They call it 13 stepping. There's 12 steps in the programs, and they call that 13 stepping, which you're not supposed to do. And 3 days before I got out of treatment, I remember the day my wife walked into this room, because they would load us up in these white vans, and they would take us from the facility, and they would bring us out on town, and they'd bring us to meetings.
Yeah.
And, she had walked in the room, and I was in an all male facility. No, there was no females there. And I was the guy when we would go to the meeting saying, you do not talk to the girls. If you do, you're not serious. And like, our lives are on the line here. Like, I was that guy, because I truly, this time, like, I wanted to stay clean, and I was a freaking, like, a maniac about it.
Yeah.
And because I didn't want to die. Like, I faced death. I truly believe I faced death. And I remember when she walked into this room, she literally had this glow about her, and I'm like, what the shit? It wasn't normal.
Yeah.
It wasn't normal. Out of everyone that walked through, and I was like, Jesus. Well, Shyla and I ended up talking at that meeting, and man, I got out 3 days later. She picked me up, and she brought me out on a date. I spent my last $8 or $13 I had to my name. I spent it at Starbucks, getting her and I a coffee. And we have been together ever since. And it's very rare that someone as early in recovery as I was, and her having 4 years clean, and then us becoming business partners. Within a year of us dating, we were married, pregnant, and had a business within a year and a half. And what we have been through as a couple, as business partners, as parents, and being in recovery and still married today, like, dude, when I tell you we are 1%ers, we are 1%ers.
You might be the 0.1%, rather.
Dude, it doesn't exist what her and I'm sure it does. I'd be crazy to say it doesn't exist.
Right.
But dude, we are in such a small group of people. And her and I take pride in that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine says, the people that we are best equipped to serve are the people we used to be, right? And, you think about that, and hopefully someone listening right now says, man, I hope that we can look to Eric as a mentor, Eric and Shyla as a mentor, because that's a big deal. Now, upon her recommendation, she says, hey, you should hit up one of these NA meetings that you mentioned. And on going there, you see a white piece of paper on a door, and it's got a job opportunity, and that leads into a sales opportunity. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So prior to the sales opportunity is I was trying to find a job, right? I'm in a halfway house at this point, and now I got to pay what they call bed rent. Bed rent. I was renting a bed. And it was, I think it was like $125 a week or two. I forget how much it was. but I couldn't find a job because, as you can see, heavily tattooed. I couldn't find a job anywhere. Like construction jobs, I couldn't find one. I was going to try to be a waiter at restaurants. They wouldn't hire me. And I ended up getting a job as a busboy at a restaurant at 28 years old, where I had to ride 2 buses there and 2 buses back home. No bullshit. And because I didn't have a license. And I would have to put makeup on my hands and my neck. So they didn't know I actually had tattoos. And I had worked at this restaurant for 2 weeks. And I remember they gave me my check after 2 weeks, and it was $147 for 2 weeks. It did not cover my bed rent.
Right.
And I, for the first time, clean, because I'm clean now for going on a few months, like maybe 3-4 months at the time. And I for the first time got the F it's, man, where I'm like, F this. This is not for me. F South Florida, F that. And my Shyla picked me up and she's like, Eric, what are you going to go back home for? She's like, there's nothing back there for you. Maybe you need to go to a meeting and you need to raise your hand and you need to get vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I did just that. I went to a meeting, raised my hand, I told everybody, like, I don't like where I'm at. You know, I can't make any money. But, well, she puts me in the, we get back in her car and she drops me off at my halfway house. And that's where that piece of paper was at. So there's a few very pivotal moments in my life where I think I'm hallucinating. I'm not. It's a power greater than me saying you either die or you get clean. I meet a gentleman in my life that I used to use drugs with. He's clean. I call him up thinking I'm going to maybe do drugs with him. He keeps me clean for 28 days, puts me on a plane to South Florida. I go work at this restaurant. Well, I meet my wife in treatment. I get a job at a restaurant. And after 2 weeks of working there, realize this is not the path for me. I get dropped. I go to a meeting and get vulnerable with people for the first time ever. I go back to my halfway house, and the piece of paper on my door has forever changed my life from a career standpoint, because it was telemarketers wanted $15 an hour. Now, telemarketers meaning you can do sales behind the phone and it doesn't matter what you look like.
Right.
So I called this guy. I called the people that were doing the interviews, and I was very clear because I was so sick of being denied. Like everywhere I would go, they were shutting me down by the way I looked. And I called them up and I said, listen, I live in a halfway house. I got X amount of days clean. I don't have a license. I don't have any sales experience. I was honest as I could be with them.
Yeah.
And they go, you're just the type of person we're looking for. Come into an interview. And I was like, what? Well, obviously they hung the sign on a halfway house door. And I went in for the interview, man. And like without, making a long drawn out story of it, within a year and a half, I became their #1 sales guy out of 200-300 people. No bullshit. I became their #1 sales guy.
Yeah. Well, and I think someone listening today can take away, maybe you can't relate 100% to Eric's story, but I think oftentimes we overlook experiences and things that have happened in our life, and we don't correlate it to what's going on currently. So I can't necessarily relate to you on the drug side, but what I always tell people is when I started in sales, I had played basketball my whole life. I played in college, and you had to have the mindset that every time you shoot the shot, you believed you were going to make it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have shot it. But in the back of the head, you knew there was a resilience that I'm not going to make them all. And so if I don't make this one, I still have to have the same amount of confidence and shoot it again next time, because next time I could have a different outcome. Well, all of a sudden I'm making phone calls and I'm like, dang, this is just like playing basketball. Like, I mean, it's just a game. Like, I know I'm not going to make them all. I'm not going to set all the meetings, but if I do it enough, like I'll have success. And I would imagine for you, it's like, hey, if I was resilient enough to overcome drug addiction, like surely I can make a freaking phone call, right? And I can overcome a no, or I can overcome an objection.
Yeah. I mean, I know without a shadow of a doubt in the beginning when I jumped there, just so everybody understands the landscape of when I started that job, I was full of anxiety.
Yeah.
My self-esteem was at a damn near an all-time low. I didn't know anything about telephone sales. I had the fear of the phone, like that's a real thing, and I
It's a
had
real
that.
thing. Yeah.
I had the phone fear, and I'm a firm believer. There are people that absolutely can be taught how to be really, really good salespeople that aren't social people. They're not extra. They're not in a crowd of people. They can't. People say, "Oh, I can sell ice to an Eskimo. I can talk to anybody. I was
Right.
born with the gift of gab." Yeah,
Yeah.
all that may be true, but can you actually close deals?
Yeah.
Like there is an art to this. And I have over 14 going on 15 years now. Like when I first started out, what got me through is I was hungry. When I say I was literally hungry. And I knew I was closing deals to eat. I was closing deals to pay for my bed so I had somewhere to sleep. I was living in a halfway house. Like I was hungry. I was probably one of the most hungry people in this entire office. So in the beginning, my work ethic it trumped all of the talent in that room.
Yep.
Like I outworked every single person in this company for a year and a half, which ultimately made me the number one guy. Not that I was the most talented. I
Yeah.
was the hungriest.
Yeah. That's so good. I love it. Well, as you progress through that and you have these sales skills, you and Shiloh decide to start a business. And you had heard maybe some things on the radio about people buying timeshares, but maybe not wanting to be in timeshares. So you start a business in helping people get out of timeshares. And that explodes. So talk a little bit about that 5 years or so, getting the business up and running. And once again, it's a leap of faith, right? It's betting on
Yeah.
yourself because there's a lot of risk involved in starting a business.
Yeah. So there came a point in the gentleman that gave me my shot on the phones,
Yeah.
which I'm forever grateful for that man. But he did a lot of things within his business I was not okay with.
Mm.
And there came a time where it was like, all right, we need to go do our own thing.
Yeah.
My wife had just graduated college, and we heard the idea of exactly like you said, you can get somebody out of a timeshare. So we bought a stack of leads and we ended up doing this out of a bedroom. And we did it out of a bedroom for about, I don't know, it was maybe a year to a year and a half. And we ended up, we would get people to sign up saying, hey, we can help you out of a timeshare. But then we would go find another company and say, hey, we'll give you a cut of this if you can actually get them out of a timeshare. And we did that for a year. Let's just call it a year.
Yeah.
We didn't actually know how to get somebody out of a timeshare when we started this.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did is we split profits with the company that did know how. And in a year's worth of time, we figured out how to get people out of timeshares.
Yeah.
So we ended up going from a bedroom to an office. And within 9.5 years, we grew this business to be the number one timeshare cancellation company in the United States of America. We had an office in Fort Lauderdale that we had over 150 team members in that office. We were in the process of building out a 30,000 square foot facility to really take this thing to an entire another level. We were enrolling 650 timeshare owners every single month. Me and my wife were netting right around $8 million a year, not gross, We
Yeah.
were grossing about 34 million. We were netting 8, and we had a partner where he got 4 million as well. But my wife and I owned 67% of the company.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to highlight there that I think could be easily missed is even though you guys didn't know how to do it, right? The
Yeah.
actual act of it, it didn't prevent you from getting there, but you also weren't so greedy to say, well, if we want 100% of it. You were willing to give up a portion of the profits for a period
Yeah.
of time to learn how to do that. And I think oftentimes when people are starting businesses, they want the whole thing. And it's like, well, there's a price to entry. You can either pay for it, right? You can hire a coach, you can, get yourself in a mastermind, whatever it is. You can
Yeah.
just flop your way through it, right? And learn
Yeah.
and maybe not have success with it. Or you can have another company and partner, right? And you might just
Yep.
have to give up some of the profits. So talk a little bit about just willingness to do that, because once again, I think that's something that frequently people don't want to do because they see the dollar signs they're missing, but they don't realize what they're, really gaining and learning from that.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what most people's problem is they just don't start.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the biggest problem is
Yeah.
they don't start at all.
Yeah.
And for me, I for a year and a half I'd done a bunch of different campaigns in that year and a half. The call center I worked on, their business model was we would test pilot campaigns and then they would go start businesses with them. So in a year and a half, I did 5 or 6, 7 different campaigns.
Yeah.
So I was able to pivot from one campaign to another, learn the scripts, write out scripts. So like I was used to it.
Yeah.
So when I got into this new model, I knew people were doing it. And who doesn't want to get a contract handed to them saying, hey, I'll give you 50% of what I just locked them up for. All you got to do is get them out of it. A lot of people would want to do that. Companies, it's like a free lead.
Right. Yeah.
And, so it's just like the wholesaling industry. When I jumped into this space, I didn't know how to get somebody out of a timeshare or a house. I didn't know how to go and find a buyer. I literally locked contracts up and I went and paid a company 35% to go find a buyer for me.
Yep.
That's what I did over there. So any industry you're getting in, somebody's already doing it. And like you sometimes got to pay to play, or you pay the price of not doing it.
Right. Exactly right. Now, as you were mentioning, your business is growing, it's significant size. And whenever you do that, oftentimes people come knocking and saying, hey, we'd like to acquire you. And that's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, there was another knock that came that was a lot less fortunate of a knock. So talk a little bit about that kind of season of venturing through the private equity into some of the litigation.
Yeah. So me and my wife didn't know we had a business we could sell.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could sell businesses. This was our first crack at being an entrepreneur, and it just so happened to work out real well for us.
Yeah.
And so we're actually going and getting a mortgage for a personal home we bought in Fort Lauderdale. It was a $7 million waterfront property. And the banker was like, dude, what do you guys do? And we told him our model, and he's like, bro, you have a cash cow on your hands.
Yeah.
He goes, have you ever thought about selling this? And we're like, selling what? And he goes, have you ever thought about selling your business? And I'm like, didn't know you could sell a business. I literally did not know you could sell a business. And he goes, dude, let me help structure a deal for you. And he got us in touch with a broker. We spent a year and a half getting our the structure of our company down, making sure all of our SOPs were proper and tight. Our financials were in order. And we ended up, sending our book out to a bunch of different private equity firms, like 200 or 300 of them. And we got offers anywhere from 147 million for 100% of the business to 97 million for 100%. So they were all pretty much 9-figure offers. And we ended up, believe it or not, the large one went away. We didn't go under an LOI with them. We ended up going under an LOI with a company that offered 54 million for 51%. My wife and I were going to retain 49% of the business.
Yeah.
Which there was going to be another sale, and this would have been well over a 9-figure exit for me and my wife.
Yeah.
We were advised, take this deal, keep 49% of your business, and get a bite at the apple again one more time.
Yep.
So we went under an LOI. They did all their due diligence. They flew out to our facility multiple times. We were 60 days away from a sale. And long story short, again, is my emails blew up, my phone was blowing up, and we ended up being sued first by the largest timeshare developer in the world, and then the second one being the second largest timeshare developer in the world. We end up being sued by them, and it didn't go. It was David versus Goliath.
Right.
We didn't do anything wrong. We were disrupting their business model, and we believe they got a hold of our book of business when we sent it out to the private equity firms, and they knew we were going to be the first timeshare exit company to ever do an exit. And if a private equity got behind us, they were in trouble, and they stopped before it could start.
Yeah.
They stopped it before the madness really started happening for them.
Yeah.
And we ended up shutting down our business, filing a Chapter 11 on it. We had to let go 150 amazing people. We had a 98% success rate on getting people out of their timeshares. And yeah, man, it went to hell in a handbasket. It was the first time I saw how corrupt the politicians were, trying to pay off politicians to stop legislations they were putting against our industry. Lawyers. The only one that won out of this entire scenario were the politicians and the lawyers.
Yeah. Now, to that, I mean, this breaks you down, and rightfully so, right? I mean, things have been going well. You had built it the right way. You were treating people well. People were doing a great job, right? Immaculate relationships. And at a point, you appear to be broken, right? Like, done. And I believe an attorney says to you, hey, man, if you can get through this, you can get through anything. And that was kind of the catalyst to the wholesaling that you're in now. So talk a little bit about, all right, I'm down again. I've been at rock bottom. I know this isn't rock bottom, but this is probably a close, close bottom here, right? Different type, but very close bottom. But let's strap up again and let's check out a next venture.
Yeah, it was at the end of an 8-hour deposition, and these attorneys were out to smoke us in any way they can. They were trying to rip my marriage apart. They were trying to rip my family apart. They were questioning in front of the public my morals and my ethics and everything. And I remember sitting at the end of the table, my hands literally on my head, and this attorney, bright beet red eyes. I don't know if he was constantly drinking or what, but his face was bloodshot. His eyes were bloodshot. He literally looked like the devil. And I remember him looking at me, and he goes, hey, kid. And I look up at him, and he goes, if you can make it through this, you can make it through anything. And little did he know who he was talking to.
Yeah.
Because I forgot where I came from. Like, I forgot 10, 11, 12 years ago where I was sitting, contemplating taking my life, and where I had made it to even be at that table. To build a business, to stay clean for all these years, to build a business, to have private equity firms interested in something I've built. And then for these guys to try and think they can take it away from me. And I remember he lit a fire under me, because they were going to beat me and my wife until we either surrendered or we settle, or they drain us, they bleed us dry.
Yep.
It was going to happen one way or the other. And the one thing I knew I wanted to do is I wanted to save my marriage, and I still wanted my family. That was really the only thing that mattered to me.
Yeah.
Screw the money, screw the houses, screw the cars. Like, if I had my family, which that's all I ever wanted in life was a family, right? I wanted something I could love, that I could take care of. And I remember looking at him being like, it's on. It's on.
Yeah.
Like, you are absolutely right. They can take everything. They can't take this.
Yeah.
They can't take what I have learned. They can't take the experiences I've had. They can't take the fucking grit and the hunger that comes with somebody like me. And he said, it was all done. I remember going home and I told my wife, I was like, honey, let's settle. Let's give them everything they want so you and I can stay together. Because as long as we got each other, we got it all.
Yeah.
Right. And we ended up striking a settlement deal with them. I ended up having to junk myself from the industry, meaning I'm never allowed back in that industry. That's how you know you're really good at what you do.
That's right.
When they say a part of the settlement is, we just don't want you to come back and do this, that means you disrupted a space. I told my wife that night, I said, honey, let's go back. Let's give them what they want. If we got to go back to broke, we got this. I said, give me a year and a half and I will get everything back that we wanted. And dude, when I tell you, me and my wife went on a mission. We went back on a mission. Within 12 months, we were back to making millions of dollars.
I love it. And I think something that's so important in what you said there is perspective, right? When you can have that perspective of like, yeah, what I'm going through sucks, but I mean, 11 years ago, I'd have killed to be in these types of problems, right? 11 years ago, my problems were much more significant, much worse. Now, yeah, it's still a problem, right? Like, these are not good things. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I can handle this problem.
Yeah. The tables look much different. The table I was sitting at 11 years ago looked a lot different fast forward to 11 years. There were times where me and my wife were like, how the heck did we get at this table?
Yeah.
Like, how did we get here? We were eating lunch with a politician, stroking them a $50,000 check to try and veto a legislation they were trying to pass in my industry. And we're like, what is going on? Like, it's crazy how times have changed for us. But I will say, everything that I've experienced, from the depths of hell, the almost committing suicide, the starting my first business, and everything happening that happened to us, I wouldn't change it for a second. Like, I wasn't prepared. There's a reason I didn't get that $54 million. I wasn't ready for it. And I wasn't ready as a man. I wasn't ready as a father. I wasn't ready as a husband. I wasn't ready to get $54 million because I probably would not be married. There's a good chance I would have went back to using drugs. Who knows?
Right.
But it was a blessing. It was God's plan that no. That check is coming too early. I'm going to put a stop to it. But what I am going to do is I'm going to give you a free runway to go and do it again. And this time, I want you to be prepared as a man. I want you to be prepared as a father. I want you to be prepared as a husband. I want you to be prepared as a leader. I want you to be prepared in all areas of your life. So when I bless you with this money, you don't take it and you just don't blow it and you can put it to good. I know that's what is the plan today.
Boom. I love it. Well, Eric, I can't think of a better way to end than on that note, man. But I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey and just the amazing things that you're doing and you're going to continue to do. And I can't wait to do this again in 2 or 3 years when the company's tripled in size, and we'll hear all the stories about how you got to that point.
Love it, man. I appreciate you so much for having me on. Honestly, thank you. It's always an honor when somebody asks you to come on and just share your story, because, 14 years ago, nobody wanted to hear my story.
That's right. Well, hey, keep doing great things, brother.
Thank you, man, so much.